Hello and welcome to the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast, mainly for experienced and aspiring people managers. I'm your host, Nina Sunday, and this is the show to help you explore ways to become the best version of yourself at work as a manager. Each episode, you hear from some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share your passion to elevate and transform team culture. They share insights in self-leadership and leading others. Together we can make workplace culture better. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others. My guest today is Tony Eades, who is Chief Strategy Officer at Salted Stone and leading advisor of inbound marketing strategy in Australia. With 25 years of business experience, in-depth knowledge of branding, marketing trends and technology here and in the US, and with multiple media appearances and keynote addresses, Tony is a highly sought-after marketing expert from SME to corporate brand strategy. Welcome, Tony Eades. And it's a true pleasure to have the pleasure of your company after we worked so closely together with you as National President of Professional Speakers Australia that first year of COVID 2020.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Nina, as always. And I really welcome being on your podcast today. But definitely, we had an exciting year together. That first year when I took over as presidency, it was the start to we came out of convention, and it was the terrible times of the pandemic that really hit our industry. But a big thanks to you, because I needed someone that I could bounce ideas with, because we had to move fast. And I think within a month we had our first national event up. And even today, people are saying it was critical to help them through the tough times that we went virtual.
And it was so fortunate that I've been to a couple of national speakers conventions, 2018, 2019. So I was really up to speed with who are the speakers that the Australians would really get value from. Thanks for being part of it today. And let's start with the first question.
Pleasure. Let's do it.
How is sales different today than it was pre-COVID?
We've become more humanized, so we need context when we're talking to people so we can actually connect more with them. People today, I believe, in our current world, are not buying your product or service. They're buying you, and they're buying a relationship.
Absolutely. And of course, mid last year, Hubspot, who I know is a CRM, I rather like what the statistics and the research that they come out with. And here are this is one dot point that they made, which is the top ways to create a positive sales experience. They've got 4 points. Listen to their needs.
Yeah.
Don't be pushy. 61% said that. Provide relevant information, 61%, and respond in a timely manner. 51% said that. So does that sort of frame a little of what you're wanting to communicate?
Yeah, 100%. Because I think, HubSpot, often bring out these stats and they're really good because they're always up to date. They're based on a lot of survey results and things like that. But listen to the needs. I mean, that goes back to what I was just saying before about knowing context. If you can't really frame or build a relationship or start to get someone really connected with you on a first time call unless you're really interested in what they are and understanding what their needs are. I think the pushiness is the biggest thing people should take away around marketing. There's also inbound sales. And the difference between inbound and outbound is you're nurturing people to come to you to request your services or your product, or they have a need of some kind. Outbound is you don't know what that need is. You've got a service you want to sell them, but you don't know if they need that service. So in the outbound call, you've got to do a lot of conversation and discovery before you even sort of say, well, do you need a new website? Because in conversation, it might not be the website they need. They might need a whole bunch of other stuff that you can help.
So HubSpot said that 80% of sales require 5 follow-up calls, whereas 44% of salespeople give up after 1 follow-up call. Ding, ding.
And again, it's so true. Like one stat before that, because I know you love your stats, but Harvard's Business Review also said that 78% of new business, right? This is the inbound coming in. 78% of new business goes to the first respondent. So at Salted Stone, for example, I've got this 5-minute rule across our organization. If an inquiry comes in, get back within 5 minutes.
I fall over myself to be as timely as I can. And if for some reason I've missed it or I'm late with it, I slap my own hand. Yeah. I fire myself.
You should do. but it's so important because you think about that lost business because, people, if they do come to you in an inbound sort of way, there's a need right now and enough that they found you and they want to talk to you. To your earlier point, though, about follow-ups, again, that's so important. It doesn't have to be follow-up phone calls. There's many ways people communicate. So it could be an email. If you know the person well, could just be a quick SMS or all of these other channels. I mean, I'm communicating across, Messenger and all sorts of things now. But just think about, the follow-up. And that follow-up can just be adding more context. Like you can add something more to the conversation. So it's not just, so many follow-ups of, did you get my proposal? Are you going to sign my proposal? It could just be, enjoyed our conversation. I also found this, which might be of interest to you. So you're adding relationship, adding value to the conversation.
So the also found this, is this something you might do after the initial discovery call and proposal as a way to stay in touch? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm actually suggesting this before you do the proposal. This is before you get to the sale. So again, if I put it in a process perspective, HubSpot works, and I've followed this methodology and it works really well, is that you have at least, 4 key areas and they have touch points in between. The first one is your intro call, and that's all about discovery. It's more listening, not speaking. It's more, tell us about your problems, what's going on, almost like a psychologist on the couch type of thing. The second stage is what we call exploratory. And that's when you book another. So at the end of the first call, you book the next call with them so that you don't leave them hanging. The next call is you've gone away and done a bit of research about their, what you've discovered in the first section. You come back now and explore some ideas. We could do this. Have you thought about this? How about this? Then it's advisory, which is the third call. And this is where you come back with your pitch. Based on what we've spoken about, this is how I think we can help.
So the pitch is done verbally. It's not sent as a proposal or action plan or anything like that.
Well, that's what I think and suggest 100% people need to do nowadays, because it keeps the conversation going. And the other thing is you can see the body language. You can hear how they react to your proposal. So my advisory call is normally done as a presentation, like a PowerPoint, not an official proposal. And it'll take them through the solution we're going to do. And at the end, there's a slide that sort of has some indicative costs just to gauge, how they're feeling. And then from there, you go the final proposal.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. So I think a lot of people just get the inquiry and just, send the proposal with the pricing. Yeah. And you're suggesting that there are some extra steps involved. And what's the next step after that?
So the next step after that is so once you've had the advisory call, you then send the proposal.
Yes.
And then you should have a fourth final meeting, and that's to discuss, if they haven't signed the proposal, they might sign the proposal so you don't need that fourth stage. The fourth stage will then be a kickoff meeting, which is like you've signed the proposal. Now let's get things moving. So first up, we're going to do this. So it just keeps that relationship flowing and there's no breaks. That's the critical thing.
I can imagine that with these steps in a big price sale, I don't know, what's the proper term for that? High ticket item.
High ticket item, yeah.
Like they're buying a submarine. But
from where? France or America?
But quite frankly, I'm flat out in my business, which is training, getting people to have the initial phone call with me. They say, I just want a price. It's like, well, I won't do that. I don't say that, but I won't do that. But
It's an interesting one, and 100% I agree with you. But you can streamline the exploratory and the advisory, but you should definitely always do the intro. And all I say to people, no matter how small the engagement is or how simple you think the engagement is, slow down the sales process, because it shows you care and it shows that you're really interested. You're building that critical relationship. Whereas otherwise, if all you do is take the call, send them a quote, it's transactional. You've not built any.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I know Simon Reynolds, who was on an earlier podcast episode of ours. I've attended a few of his boot camps over the years, and he talked about, I use the acronym OTIP, own the indecision period. And he would say that you must, as you say, send follow-up, here's some extra information you might want. So stay in touch that way. So that way, even if it has been a transactional proposal or action plan, you're finding another reason to stay in contact with them. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, even if you send them the proposal, they're going to have questions, right? They might have concerns over the price if you haven't discussed it. I always actually, in the intro call, which a lot of people the sort of the decisions out on whether people do this or not. I find it makes a lot of sense to do it in the intro call, is to get some indication of budget. It not right up front, but during that, it's kind of like, well, just out of interest, do you have a particular budget or framework that I need to be thinking about? Because that makes it so much easier. If they say, I've got 10 grand or I've got 20 grand for you to run this workshop for me or whatever it might be, you're not going to come back with a $100,000 12-month program.
What percentage of people will say, oh, no, my boss just wanted me to get information? Well, I don't know that they've got a budget.
Well, I've got an answer for that one too, Nina. I think it's more that they say, I don't have a budget. I've no idea of I have no budget. So then you start throwing numbers. You start saying, okay, well, generally this thing could cost $20,000. Oh, well, I don't have that much. And you go, well, you do have a budget.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, I usually sort of test the water as well with a bit of a, pin the tail on the donkey sort of thing.
And I think the easy way to do it, I know folks do get a bit hung up with talking about price or asking for budget, but I always find it's good if you talk about budget as in with other clients, or recently we did something similar and it was around this sort of price, because then you're not putting the pressure on them or on yourself to say, well, that engagement sounds like it's 10 grand. You can say, well, I did one of these similar. So you're adding a bit of trustworthiness to the call and it cost around 10 to 15,000. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
You are a mine of good tips, Tony. I should have interviewed you much sooner. All right, here's an interesting sales follow-up statistic from this HubSpot blog. 60% of customers say no 4 times before saying yes, whereas 48% of salespeople never even make a single follow-up attempt.
I know, that's scary. That's scary. The second part's the scariest bit, isn't it? That it's people are just looking at numbers. It's kind of like some of the biggest deals that I've won have been because of perseverance. And I think you probably have as well.
Can I tell you, one of the biggest clients I ended up having was with a CEO who was always on a plane somewhere. In fact, we're going back a few decades now, but he was Qantas he flew with. He was touted as the most flown CEO in Australia. So I won't say who it is.
Yeah.
But eventually, and this was in the days before CRMs, I actually had index cards. And my envelope of index cards was getting thicker and thicker because it was all about speaking to his EA and saying, oh, no, he'll be back next week. So I try next week. Oh, no, he's gone to London. He'll be back so-and-so. Then try. Oh, no, he's gone to America. Eventually, like pages and pages of index cards, he answered the phone. He said, I was waiting for you to call. And then I got course after course after course in multiple cities. And I went, that perseverance really paid off.
Yeah.
So
that
was a perfect example.
And nowadays, I mean, it's not just to be the most flown CEO, but most of us are super busy. We've got emails coming in, we've got all sorts of things. So one of the things that I think is good as well is to think about how else can I create a touch point, right? It doesn't have to be the phoning the EA or trying to phone through. Even going back to the old snail mail. I mean, how often do you receive a little card in the mail saying, really looking forward to connecting with you. I know you're super busy, but hopefully we can talk soon. Got some great ideas I want to share with you. That's going to get through to him at some point, and then he's going to join the dots together and go, oh, that's Nina Sunday. Didn't she leave a message for me? Hasn't she connected with me on LinkedIn? And all of a sudden, all the dots come together, and you started to build that relationship and shown interest in having a conversation with them.
Well, it's interesting. I noticed that if they say yes to my request on LinkedIn, I don't do it straight away. I do that a little bit after time has elapsed and there's maybe been some sort of interaction. Yeah. And then I'll do a LinkedIn request. If they say yes, I nearly always get the deal.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people are not LinkedIn people at all. It doesn't mean I won't get the deal, but when they say yes, it's a buying signal, basically. Yeah. So I do that. Yeah.
And I think touching on something like LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn definitely, I see people, I mean, I'm not a LinkedIn expert by any means, but to me, you can build the same rapport with people you've connected with on LinkedIn by putting good, relevant content up about what you do and what you're interested in, because they're going to see it. It's going to come in their feed. They might not see the first time. They might see it a few days later, but eventually they're going to start to realize that the connection they've got with you and what it's about, so that when you do reach out to them, they've been, following your content.
Oh, yes. And I make a point of giving good content and less marketing on LinkedIn, and also on the emails that I send out. Look, there's one statistic that I want to disagree with.
Yep.
It says it's about, did I catch you at a bad time, makes you 40% less likely to book a meeting, while that's not the bit. While asking how are you increases your likelihood of booking a meeting by 3.4 times. Now, I guess the how are you is okay if you know each other, but put it this way, I'm on the receiving end of telemarketing calls, and they'll say, hello, how are you? And I go, oh, this is a sales call.
Yeah.
Already my guard is up. They haven't even told me who they are.
Yeah.
But that's not really what that statistic is referring to, is it?
I think the statistic is a bit isolated, right? If it's going by a telemarketing call, then we're sort of starting to bridge on the cold call concept.
Yes. And
right?
I don't do cold calls either.
No. And I'm the same as you. If someone calls up and I answer my mobile or something like that, nowadays it's more mobile, right? Which is even more personal, because they're not coming through your switchboard, they're coming straight to your personal mobile. Okay. But when they say, how are you? I pause and then I go, who are you? Yes. Is my answer. Because it's kind of like, I don't know who you are. And then the next question is, what do you want? Because you're already on the defensive, right? So I always just, honestly, I do not make unsolicited phone calls. Buying databases, it's just, we live in such a digital world now. You could find about anybody just by Google searching, LinkedIn, everyone's got a digital footprint of some kind, and you just got to find that context.
Yeah.
When you find the context, it could be that you've worked with someone similar to them, or someone similar to them. At least you can start the conversation with, hi. And to your point, my name is, like, the reason for my call or why I'm calling. So you're not actually, putting them on the back foot. I spoke to Josh Smith the other day, and he suggested I give you a call or something like that. Like, start in a conversational way.
Absolutely. Now that brings me to your whole point about conversational sales, conversational approach, and about embracing silence. Perhaps tell us a little bit more about that, please, Tony.
Yeah, so the important thing, I think, is when we actually call up or have a conversation with someone that we're building a rapport with, so it's all new, silence is golden. Silence is our biggest asset, because I think the problem is a lot of people are almost running off a script. They're almost thinking like, if there's any silence on the phone, they're going to just hang up on me. Now, most people are not going to hang up on you, unless, and if they do, it's pointless calling them, right? They're not interested. But you start the conversation, and if you ask a question, then wait for an answer, because what you're trying to do is get the conversation two ways, not one way. Because if all they're doing is quiet on the other end and listening to you, they're either not engaged or they've just left the phone and walked away. So
exactly.
You need the silence. Use silence. 2 ears, 1 mouth. The old story that people say you should listen twice as much as you speak, and then you start to build a rapport. So silence is golden on any call you make.
And I understand you have a personal mantra: to sell is to be human.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Again, that comes back to, just thinking about the fact that we are, we've got a purpose, like we're trying to call this person and we want to sell them something, right? But that's further down the track, right? We work on the idea that there's 3 key stages that people go through when they are looking for a service or need something, right? There's the awareness stage, right? And the awareness stage is basically, I think I've got a problem. I'm not quite sure how to solve it. I really should look at that, right? That's awareness. Second stage is consideration. Okay, I know I have a problem. I know I need to get it sorted. Who can solve it for me? And then there's the decision stage. Okay, I've now decided I want to work with Nina Sunday. How are you going to work with me? How are we going to solve my problem? So when you first talk to somebody, you've got to think you're at the awareness stage. And at the awareness stage, it's a discovery call. It's got to be conversational. You've got to sell as a really interested human being, as though you and I met at a networking event and you were telling me, oh, I'm just so under pump. I haven't got a CRM. I'm looking at 5 different, CRM packages. One guy tells me this, one person tells me that. I don't know what to do. Oh, yeah, I know the problem. I had the same situation. And then you start to talk and converse. That's human selling or conversational selling.
That's right. That's good.
Hmm.
Another statistic that I thought was a bit curious, at least 50% of your prospects are not a good fit for what you sell.
Yeah.
So that puts a bit of onus on the salesperson, that they have to be honest and sometimes walk away from the pitch.
Yeah. I think, Nina, that the hardest thing for a salesperson to do, because their primary reason for being in their role is to sell, is to actually say no to a deal. But you and I have been around for a little while. We've had plenty of shock horror deals where we have said, yes, I'll do that, because we're interested in the money and we don't want to say no to any sales deal. And afterwards you think, you could have done 2 or 3 more better relationship engagements than that one.
Well, that's right, because a whale can sink you. And if you say yes to something that you have to do all this research to come up to par with, well, then it's actually cost you money. It hasn't moved you forward.
100%. And I think that goes back to our early conversation about the importance of the introduction call. Like, if you get enough of the discovery out in the introduction call, you'll know if you've got a good, beat with the prospect. And also the budget, they might want the world. I mean, how many times I've spoken to people and they've only got, a handful of change to spend on it. They've just got no concept of what they need versus how much they need to spend.
And what's your best tip for anybody who's leading salespeople? How does a people manager? I mean, they may not be a qualified or experienced sales manager, but they may have salespeople under their umbrella. What's the best way to sort of keep them focused on results, or focused on just quality communication, not a numbers game, which is the old slogan in sales? Oh, it's a numbers game.
Yeah. Well, I remember, wasn't it used to be, how many calls did you make? How many converted? It was all 100% a numbers game. So I think, what we've got to do is we've got to not be measuring, firstly calls and all of that kind of stuff, and reach more about how many valuable conversations have you had. Yes. Because it's not a numbers game. You could have one, like your example before about that massive client that you built. You could have one good, valuable conversation that's worth 10 or 20 short cold calls. So the first thing is value the conversation and the relationship. Don't measure it on how many actual times did you pick up the phone and connect with someone, because that's not the measurable piece here. And I think the other thing is work on the fact that we live in this world of data, right? So a critical thing for every salesperson, in fact, every business person or every manager, is the power of the CRM, the customer relationship manager, right? So if you don't have that, so HubSpot has a free CRM, so there's no excuse for, I don't know which one to get or how much it's going to cost. You start for free, and everybody works off the same CRM. So you can see who's looking at your posts, who's viewing, your LinkedIn messages, who's actually engaging on your website, because all of that kind of information can be tracked, like almost like a Big Brother thing, but it just shows you which clients or prospects are engaging more with you. So they're the ones you can easily nurture to the next stage.
I know some salespeople and some companies just let their salespeople record client history on an Excel spreadsheet. Do you find that inexplicable?
Never.
I find that inexplicable. Oh, it's good enough. What?
I tell you, look, if we haven't moved on from Excel spreadsheets, at least to Google sheets, but I mean, they've all got their purpose. But yeah, I mean, it's static, right? We don't live in a static world.
But also, where do you see the history? It has to keep going further to the right, off screen. At least with a CRM, you tend to have a picture of the whole relationship. Sort of, it's like I feel like I'm a pilot driving a plane, and I've got all these fields, and in one glance, I get a picture of where this particular client or prospect is at. To me, if I don't have it, I feel like I'm driving blind or in the fog.
Well, if you use your analogy of the plane, like if people are using an Excel spreadsheet, they're in an old-fashioned tiger moth where they've got to pull all the levers and check every dial, whereas you and I are on autopilot. Like the thing is
Yeah.
flying itself, because a CRM is basically putting your business on autopilot. Especially if you go to the next stage where you start to bring in the lovely term of automation. So marketing automation and even sales automation, like
Yes.
salespeople more so generally, without upsetting people, generally salespeople are lazy when it comes to data entry. So that Excel spreadsheet example is probably not up to date, because who's going to just every call type up all the details? So you need to have the power of technology to work with you and self-populate itself. So, you can look at stuff rather than import data all the time.
What I used to have Goldmine software before I went to the cloud. But one of the things that was in it was the ability for the sales manager to actually see what their because I had 5 salespeople at one point. I could actually go in and see what they were posting. I mean, is that the sort of thing that CRMs should be able to provide?
Yeah, well, it goes back to your early question about, what's the role of the sales manager, over the sales team. So the sales manager can create a series of dashboards about his whole team. So he can look at how they're going, who's interacting with them, who's opening and closing proposals. So that's the other thing you mentioned before, like send a proposal out. We use Quilla, right, which is a great program for creating really dynamic proposals that actually have video in them and everything. But I can see who's opened it, where they've shared it, how long they've spent looking at every section in the proposal. So if they spend 60% of their time on the pricing section, then I know price is going to be an issue. If they spend 60% on the proposal details and the services we're offering, then when I do the follow-up call, I can actually focus on the area where they spent most time because their interest was in that section. This is all the stuff that's available to us to help us convert.
There's all these apps and applications, and you're not pushing any particular one apart from the fact that we're talking a bit about HubSpot. But I use a different CRM myself. But the thing is to have one, to have a CRM that has client history. And this is my message to managers: if you're not capturing the information of your salesperson, if and when they leave, you've lost all that work that they've invested in leads, because you don't know what the history is, or you have to go in and see what are they writing, because if someone else can't decipher their abbreviations, which happened to me once, I had a salesperson writing in all this private, code, if you like. I said, you have to write as if anybody can read it, and I have to be able to read it, so it's not just for you.
No, 100%. And the other thing as well, not even just people leaving, but we live in a world of a pandemic where people are sick more than ever. You have a big deal on the table that one salesperson is working through and they're sick for a week. With a CRM, someone can jump in and pick up where they've left off and continue that conversation and keep that deal alive. Whereas with an Excel spreadsheet or locked off emails or non-existent CRMs, you can't do that. With any kind of CRM, you should do what you did, like try a few of them out and play with them, because if you find the learning curve too hard, you're not going to use it, and your team isn't going to use it. But the problem is, once you commit to one, stick with it, for a longer term, because it's very hard to then change CRMs midway. Once you've embedded it in the DNA of your business. But just, so many of the CRMs nowadays are a lot easier to use, but whatever you do, don't use an Excel spreadsheet. I don't know. At least move on.
Whoever is listening, just it's not that expensive to get a decent little CRM. We're not talking about top of the range, that Salesforce, which is really enterprise level and not cheap. But there are lots of little CRMs out there, and they come and go. But, just give it a go. And the other thing with software is get one person to trial it for 30 days nonstop and let them report back. And that's the way you kind of invest time in that learning curve.
So I need a CRM. They go to the first one. Oh, number one, Google, only because they paid for the ad, and they download it and they start using it. And it's kind of like, well, hang on a second. Just because Nina said get a CRM, not necessarily that one. Just
in closing, Tony, and what's your favorite closing question that when the time is right will actually move people or nudge them to the next stage?
Well, that's an easy one, actually. And it's probably, if I kind of do it in two ways, is at the end of every meeting, book the next meeting. Yeah. It's a simple thing, but people just sort of feel like, oh, that was a great call. And then you'll say to them, and I have salespeople as well, and I'll say to them, okay, so what's the next step? Oh, well, they're going to come back to me, when they've had to think about it. Well, you don't leave anything hanging. Like the person that's in control of the process and the buyer journey should be you, right? You're the one that should say, well, great. Now, these are the takeaways. So finish the meeting with action points. I'm going to do this. You're going to do this. When do you want to catch up again? And you actually grab your calendars, because everybody should have an active calendar. They shouldn't, or if they're still using the old diary, then they can go to the diary. These are the Excel spreadsheet people. But you should be able to book in the thing, because then you're committed to make a next step. Because if you don't, you've constantly got to be doing that 18 follow-ups.
Well, then they say, well, I don't know when I'm going to be looking at it, and I don't know. Can you then sort of suggest, well, shall we just make a time when we can do a check-in?
Well,
is that how you would approach it?
Well, let me paraphrase. There's a classic guy. You can Google this guy from HubSpot called Dan Tyre. He was like their third or fourth employee when they first started, but he is their kind of sales guru, and he runs boot camp sales courses. And I did a couple of his, and that was one of the questions people asked, is kind of like, well, when you say Dan to these people, well, when do you want to meet up again? And they say, oh, well, I'm busy. Could be a couple of weeks. I've got kids are there, and they've got every excuse under the sun. He would just pause quietly, laugh, and then go, let's meet next week. How's Friday at 10? And take control. And you think he is an American Texan, so they are a little bit pushy, but there's some relevance in that, because they're just making excuses because they're so busy, and you can make their life simpler by just saying, this is one thing you don't have to worry about. Let's move at 10, and by then I'll have X, Y, and Z ready for you. And most of the time they say,
when you meet with them is when you actually give them the proposal to run through it with them.
Or the next stage, the exploratory or the advisory. It might not be the proposal. If it is the proposal, then straight to that. But
yeah, I guess it depends on what you're selling and the cycle and
the cycle,
how big the contract is, that sort of thing. That's very interesting.
It's super critical, because we're all busy people, right? Ourselves as well. Like there's nothing worse than trying to align our diaries together. I mean, we did pretty well to get this together for today.
We did.
There was a hole in my diary and a hole in your diary, so we grabbed it. But that's why you got to think like that. You got to think about, like, keep the relationship building. And it's kind of the same way as, if you go out to dinner or drinks with a few friends and you have a fantastic time, you don't just say, oh, we'll do this again and let it go. You sort of say, well, yeah, let's do this again next month, or, and you try and sort of discuss the next step, the next thing.
Marvelous, Tony. It's been a true joy speaking with you today. Thanks for making the time. And it was great conversation. Thank you. You're a very wise person.
That's fantastic. Nina, thanks very much. Love being on the show.
Pleasure. This episode, we've been speaking with Tony Eades on the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast for experienced and aspiring people managers. I'm your host, Nina Sunday. Thank you for listening. Until next time, see you then.